Well, hey there. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for a special conversation with two very powerful communicators. Yeah. We were recently blessed to connect with these two experts and discuss something called parentification, which we all need to be aware of as parents and step-parents.
That's for sure. Now, we've had both of our guests on the show before, but not together in one conversation. Right. We're excited. And the combination, it made for a very rich discussion. So we're going to share a quick introduction and then hop right into the conversation. Mm-hmm. Lauren Reitzema is the author of In Their Shoes, a book dedicated to helping parents better understand and connect with children of divorce. Her interest in relationship skills began when her parents divorced after almost 20 years of marriage. Seeking to understand better patterns for her own future legacy, she earned a bachelor in communication from TCU. Her vocational speaking experience spans over 15 years, teaching a variety of relationship skills to youth, adults, and corporate teams. In the fall of 2022, Lauren also released the book Relationship Essentials: Skills to Feel Heard, Fight Fair, and Set Boundaries in All Areas of Life, which was co-authored with her mom. She and her husband, Josh, love adventures with their 3 children. All Colorado natives, they are avid skiers, outdoor enthusiasts, and Broncos fans.
All right. We are so grateful to know Lauren.
Yes.
And joining us along with Lauren is our friend, Ron Deal.
Woohoo!
Now, Ron is one of the most widely read and viewed experts on blended families in the country. He is director of Family Life Blended, founder of Smart Step Families, and the co-author and consulting editor of the Smart Step Family series of books, including the best-selling book, Building Love Together in Blended Families, The 5 Love Languages and Becoming Step Family Smart. That was co-written with Gary Chapman. Mm-hmm. He also wrote the Smart Step Family, 7 Steps to a Healthy Family, and Preparing to Blend. Mm-hmm. Ron's a licensed marriage and family therapist, a popular conference speaker, and the host of the Family Life Blended podcast. Now, Ron and his wife, Nan, have 3 sons, and they live in Little Rock, Arkansas. So let's go ahead and jump right into this conversation with Ron and Lauren. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork,
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey, Ron. Hey, Lauren. Welcome back. We're so blessed to have both of you back on the show.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to be with you.
Yeah. Well, we're here today to talk a little bit about this term parentification. And to kind of get this started, Ron, I wonder, could you tell us, what does parentification even mean?
Well, I really don't have a formal definition, but what I want to give our listeners is a functional definition. In other words, what does it actually do? What's it like? There is one relationship in the universe that is not mutually beneficial. And that's parent-child relationships. Oftentimes people have never really thought about this before, but when our children are born, they give us nothing but a little snot and poop, and they beg from us constantly for food and sustenance and care. There's no two-way street to that relationship. We do the caring, we do the loving, we do the take the action to care for the other, and they're really not caring for us. Now, we all know we get something out of this child, but it's not them caring for us. By the way, nobody would stand for this sort of relationship in anything else in life. You wouldn't have a marriage like this. You wouldn't want a business partner who acts like a baby and needs you to do everything. Like, that wouldn't last long. You wouldn't form a sales relationship with some company and you provide the product and they provide the sales, take care of it, and then they never do their part. Like that doesn't happen, but it's okay in parent-child relationships because basically when I'm 90, then I'm going to get my payback. That's when my kids are going to take care of me.
Yep.
They're going to take care of my diapers and they're going to get me in the wheelchair. And, that's the way life rolls. They pay it forward for us at the end of life, and then they pay it forward with our grandchildren.
Right.
This is the only relationship that works this way. Now, having said that, imagine a parent needing the child to parent the adult. That's parentification. It's when you start leaning on your child to give you something that only another adult should give you, a marriage partner, for example, or a friend, or a family relative, somebody. You're relying on a child to parent you. That's it, at its soul. That's what parentification is. So that might look like needing affirmation from the child. Is Daddy doing a good job? Am I doing a good job? Not just a little flippant question here and there, but when you're really relying on this kid to tell you you're okay, that's parentification. When you are asking the child to be responsible for you, that's parentification. When you overburden a child with excessive responsibilities for their younger siblings. Now, all siblings take care of the younger sibling to some degree or another. But when somebody ends up becoming dad or mom functionally within the home, that's too much burden to put on a child when it's not developmentally appropriate for them. When I'm 90, it's developmentally appropriate for my kids to take care of me. And we would all just go, that's the natural course of life. But if my child is 6 or my child is 14, or if they're 30, and I rely on them to take care of me, something's not right.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful, Ron. Thank you. Lauren, what might you add to that?
One of I agree with and understand it in all of this, the same terminology that Ron so eloquently described. One of the ways that I learned to really understand how to differentiate caring for somebody who's older versus parenting somebody who's older is a role reversal. So, when you're setting a role for here's your roles and responsibilities in this particular relationship, the role of a parent is to do a lot of the hard-sided boundary setting and setting limits and teaching and training. And the role of a child is to learn from that expert who has had more life experience and has the authority to actually direct you. And when you start to feel or sense that the role of a child is becoming one that's required to parent, that was a helpful cue for me to discern, am I being caring and kind for an older generation, or am I actually parenting them? And I learned that there's actually a term in psychology called parentification that gave me clarity to know, this is actually happening. And this particular audience that I'm watching, or sometimes internally in my own life. And I need to just understand how to free myself from the responsibility that I'm actually not a parent. And so this shouldn't be an expectation that's going to leave me feeling defeated or anxious or worried, which can be a ramification of when this happens. That's an outcome of the parentification process.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. As a parent who's been through a divorce and spent some time as a single mom, I see how easily we can slip into this. Because as I went through my divorce, I was experiencing so much loss. And it just so happened at the time of my divorce, I was also dealing with some chemical dependency issues. And so I was in a treatment center. I was absolutely feeling hopeless. I was experiencing so much loss and pain. I made a comment to the counselor that, well, at least I have my daughter. And I'm so thankful. I think back on that experience and I remember that conversation because she pulled me aside and said, do not depend on your daughter to meet your emotional needs. She cannot carry that burden. And then this counselor opened up and shared with me how her mother had done that to her. and how it was a responsibility and a burden she could never meet, no matter how hard she tried. And she said to me, this dynamic stole my childhood. And that stuck with me. And every time I started to want to lean in to gravitating towards my daughter for comfort and to meet that need of emotional stability for me, because I was struggling. Every time I would stop myself and remember that conversation and no, I'm not. I'm going to call my sponsor. I'm going to call my counselor. I'm going to call a friend. I'm not going to burden my child with this. But I see how easy it is when you're in that place of emotional pain and sometimes even desperation to receive that admiration and that validation and love that we put that burden on a child.
You know, you guys, I'm reacting to that comment that it stole her childhood. Because all of a sudden she's not being a child anymore. I mean, the antithesis of parentification is letting kids be kids and whatever is developmentally appropriate for them, to let them just enjoy being a child, not having to take on the anxieties or the worry of adult things. I mean, that's essentially what when you're getting it backwards, the kids are carrying those burdens. And one last quick comment, that your counselor was absolutely right when she said a child can't carry this. But let me tell you something, they will try. Because of their excessive love for us. They'll do whatever they need to do. They'll cook and clean and take care of stuff and, wake us up in the morning if we're not getting to the job and about to be fired again. And like when you go down, they will go up and they will fill whatever gap we are leaving in the environment. Now, here, by the way, is a little bit of the prescription of how to undo this. When you go up in your functioning, they get to come down, like fill the gap. And all of a sudden they don't have to fill it anymore. We can come back to that idea, but kids will try to take care of us.
What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck. And quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate. Because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
I can speak to that personally. When my parents first split and I was an adult child, because I was a 16-year-old at that point in time. I was driving. I was responsible for my grades and was very performance driven and got myself to my sports. And I wasn't as dependent because I had taken that developmentally appropriate leap into more autonomy with my age, with a healthy demographic of parents in a marriage. But then when everything kind of hit the fan and my family structure changed dramatically, I really, really struggled seeing both of my parents struggle. And as a performance driven kid, I wanted to help and remember the things like making sure that my mom got in the shower and woke up that day because she was feeling really depressed. And I'd never seen her that way because she was the most performance driven and capable woman. And her strength just depleted because of the emotional capacity that she was in her grief state. And yet I was one of the older children. I was one of four. And I felt like it was my responsibility not just to be okay with the divorce and not let anyone see me crumble, but to also put my family members back together because their crumbling reflected on me. And so whether it was selfishly motivated or whether it was just survival motivated, I do have strong memories of trying to make what was not okay, and feeling that burden was very private because it just wasn't something you shared with other people. And we see this a lot. You always talk about, as a parent now, of budding teenagers, and that comparison game is so real. And we always want to say, well, my kid's more mature than yours, and I have very mature children. And I always remind people when we're doing workshops and training through my vocational work that maturity is determined by brain development, not by life experience. And I don't care if your 16-year-old is holding 3 jobs and helping raise 2 siblings, their brain is not mature enough to handle this. They're still a child. And we need to be sure that we create structural supports and community collaboration so that you can let them be where they are while still teaching responsibility in an appropriate way. And so that's hitting home because I want to think my kids are more mature than the average, but they're not. They're still pre-teenage developmentally, where their brain is. And I always say your prefrontal cortex is what makes you mature, and it's not ready until you're 25. So you got a long ride.
Yeah. Well, yours might not be, Lauren, but mine, they're
not true.
Right.
Absolutely.
I've just learned how to take ownership of things. No.
Well, maybe we need to talk about my maturity, actually.
And, while we're talking about this subject of maturity, and I'm kind of just asking you guys, is it true that sometimes a child who has been given a lot of responsibility in the home and been kind of told by that parent that, oh, you're so mature and you're so responsible, and they kind of put that role on the child of being that mature person, does that kind of leak out into this area where kids are told they can choose what home they're going to live in? Have you ever, what do you think about that, Ron?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a direct correlation there, but it kind of lines up with if you're relying on your children too much, then when it comes time to make decisions about visitation schedule, then you rely on your children too much. Like you put them in the position of being judge and jury and making those decisions when really you can still parent and give some leadership. Yes, you want to ask, you want to talk, you want to gauge your children, you want to know what they think about things, but you be the parent at the end of the day. And don't let them, I'll let them decide, then it'll be okay. Well, then they got to walk out the decision that they made to be with parent A instead of B, and the guilt that comes along with that. And that's a burden. That's not for kids. That's an adult decision.
So that could possibly be kind of an offshoot of a child that's been
potentially, it could. It could be another example of relying on the child too much.
That's interesting.
As we see that,
I can remember in my experience, there was an age that was affiliated with the court proceedings in the custody that my younger sister was much more impacted by than my siblings and I, because I believe in the state of Colorado, at 16, we had a little bit more of a voice in making the choice. So sometimes the contextual structure of what is required of the settlement and the agreement, and I'm not an expert at all the different laws and legality, the terminology, but I do remember the personal impact I remember my situation being a little bit more freedom giving in making the choice than my little sister, but it didn't make it any easier because she felt stuck in the battle of adults on her behalf. And we felt stuck with the guilt Ron just mentioned of, is one parent going to feel less than or less loved? Or are we, if we make this choice for our own purposes of convenience or location or friends, is it going to rub off on the emotional state of my parent? And is it going to potentially come back and hurt me because it can be used to admonish or to show guilt or to induce shame? And all of those are really, really nuanced realities of what happens when you've got roles and regulations going on in process, and then also just the emotional context of the family structure. So it's a really sensitive and real issue.
Yeah, let me take this in a little different direction, just so we kind of cover the lay of the land. We've talked about between home realities for kids a little bit. I want to go a little bit further there, because I think the obvious example of parentification is a parent who is drunk in the morning, can't get out of bed, about to lose their third job. There's no milk in the fridge. Nobody's been to the store in weeks. And the kid gets up and does all of that, gets the child up, makes the phone call, gets the younger sibs up, cooks breakfast, gets everybody to school. Okay. That's an obvious parentification. But another one that is not so obvious that I think far more people need to think about is the between home dynamic. When you say something derogatory about the other parent in front of your child, you are asking your child to take care of you emotionally. You're asking them to choose you over the other household. You're asking them to agree with you about the other household. You are, in effect, asking them to be an adult and caretake for you. But it's far more subtle, because you're still going to work and you're still paying the bills and taking care of all the logistics in the home, but you're now emotionally relying on your child to be your advocate as it relates to their other parent. Maybe that's out of hurt or bitterness from the divorce or the past. Maybe that's just, I don't know, you're trying to make a point to the other household. And it's also sort of parentification when you communicate through your child to the other household. That absolutely puts them into an adult position. That stuff wears and tears on a child's heart. They carry that, because everything they say, just imagine, play that out. They get to the other home and they communicate a message, and that parent gets mad, and they're thinking, man, if I'd said it a little different, then mom wouldn't be dad. But dad's already mad at mom. That's why he communicates through me. So, here's this 12-year-old trying to be an ambassador between two warring nations. No, that too is burdening the child with something that is an adult task.
That's
and
really
how
powerful.
does that play out, Ron? Because you see the long-term implications of that 12-year-old brain having been parentified, and then creating how that actually patterns in their own understanding of parenting when they do become of age and they're ready. And can you speak to that longevity of, because I think so often the goal of learning some of these things and avoiding patterns when you're in a really emotionally broken place is good to hear and understand, but people don't recognize the long-term impacts of a short-term reactionary decision. And so I'd love for you to just speak to some of the developmental barriers that parentified children have to face when they actually do become adults. How does that play out?
Yeah. So just imagine the pain that leaves on a child's heart. The residue is, okay, I need to hide as much as possible between people who are upset with each other. I need to lay low, keep my head down, try to withdraw. If I just won't be seen, then I won't have to be put back in the middle again. Okay, now fast forward about 10 years to dating for this child. And they're walking around keeping their head low, trying not to be seen. And the more they develop a relationship with somebody who potentially becomes somebody they could marry, the more intimacy that comes between them, the more they want to hide. So they spend their life living out what they learned to do when they were 12. That is not the kind of thing we're setting them up for divorce when they're 26. That's the thing when you play it out. This is the burden you're putting on your child.
Yeah.
And nobody sits around going, how can I burden my child? How can I burden? I really want to mess up my kid. No, nobody does that.
Right.
And yet when we, without even realizing it, rely on that kid, you just got to know there's a consequence to that, and you can undo it. I mean, you can just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Start filling the empty space that you're letting the kid fill, and you be the adult.
Yeah. I'm wondering about this other dynamic, Ron, what your thoughts would be of the parent who, they have probably really good intentions when they say goodbye to the child going off to visitation, and kind of do, oh, I'm going to miss you so much. Oh, I'm so sad you're leaving. Probably thinking, I want the child to know that I'm going to miss them. And then when they return, oh, I missed you so much. It's just not the same when you're here.
I couldn't sleep without you. I just haven't been able to do anything. And I would say communicate 2 messages. Oh, I'm going to miss you so much. Cannot wait to see you again. I got some plans. I've got to do some things with some friends. We're going to go and do this. We're going to do that. We're going to take care of this. We're going to talk to Grandpa a little bit. We'll make sure that you get to talk to him when you come back next weekend. That's going to be great. Mommy's okay. Daddy's doing great.
Yeah.
Love you. Have a great time. I'm going to miss you. So there's 2 messages there, right? I'm missing you because of who you are, but I'm not missing you because you're supposed to do something for me.
Right.
I'm taking care of me.
Yeah, my life isn't going to fall apart because you aren't here.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel the need to just sort of pause for a second, Lauren. I don't know if you're feeling this too. I don't want listeners to go, oh my gosh, I parentified my child. They're screwed up for life. This is not an easy thing. You make, you have a bad day and all of us. No, we're not saying that at all. It's the pattern over time when a child carries the weight of being an adult in some capacity that can eventually, bear fruit in the wrong kind of fruit in their heart and in their life. By the way, it can bear some good fruit. Kids who are responsible for their younger siblings, for example, and have a little extra responsibility, grow up to be pretty responsible people, and they get stuff done as adults. And that actually can help them in their career and their outlook in life. It can be a good skill that they learn. But there's a difference between having a skill that you learned in childhood and carrying the emotional weight of the well-being of others for whom you can never really fix.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an impossible task. That's what parentification does. You really can't even be successful as a child in carrying that weight for your parent. You're never going to help your parent be more responsible, but yet you're acting like you can. It's a losing game. That's the burden. Skill building is great. Carrying that weight is a burden.
Yeah. I wonder, if I'm a listener and I'm going, okay, all right, I've had a couple times where I've said I miss you and that kind of thing, and Ron just helped me realize, okay, I'm not messing my kids up for life. That's good. And then there's also some listeners maybe who are going, well, shoot, I have kind of had a pattern of these kinds of things, and certainly I love my kids. I want to prepare them for adulthood, to be successful and to be whole. But I am doing some of these things as a pattern. What are maybe 2 or 3 simple things that I can do this week to start to break that pattern and to start to free them up to just be kids?
Speak to that with boundary setting. Boundaries it's such a big word, but it's clarifying roles and setting healthy boundaries. And you can start to de-parentify simply by saying, you know what? The parent here, say that out loud. You don't even have to do anything different, but just saying, I'm a parent. Do you know that I brought you into this planet and I have put food on the table. I've packed your lunch most days. I'm sorry for the days that I had to, I sent you to hot lunch, but just that empowerment of I am the parent. And sometimes just saying that to the child is enough for a starting line to just say, you're right. I'm a kid, and just giving them freedom. This isn't your responsibility. You're going to get to be an adult soon or very far from now. And it's my job and my gift to give you your childhood. And so I may not do this perfectly, but I want you to know you don't have to be the parent and you don't even have to do anything differently. But saying that is going to give them the freedom to say, oh, I'm not in charge. I am just a child. And then as you start to say, I am the parent, it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy of what would a parent do? What should a parent do? And surrounding yourself with people that can be your sounding board, that is not, to your point, Kim, your daughter, but like who start building your team. But I have to have a surprise. I surprised my kids with a puppy for the first time ever last July. And I had to build my team of safety so that I could, when I really just wanted to tell them and divulge the information, I wasn't going to leak that secret in my home. But if I didn't have the team member, I was more likely to ruin a surprise. It's just who can be that safe spot. It doesn't always have to be a counselor or a clergy member or a neighbor. It can be somebody as simple as the grocery store clerk, like, oh my gosh, I have a surprise for my kids. And I'm telling you, because I know you're not going to see them. Be a little bit more discerning if you're talking about issues of divorce and blending a family. But I share that simply because I think it frees us as humans. We say words like boundaries and freedom and how to set a trajectory, and they just become overwhelming. And it's very, very basic starting line. I'm the parent, you're the child. Say those words over and over again. And then potentially, I'm going to let Ron pick up the conversation here, because I'm sure he has some really good practical advice to actually put behavior to that.
Yeah. I love, Lauren, what you've just said. I think that's wonderful. And especially build your team, because if you were relying on a child in a certain way for certain stuff, maybe there's somebody else, grandma, or another family member that can help fill some of those gaps. So you might have to go get somebody. But essentially, the heart of it is what you said. You are retiring your child from being a caretaker. Yeah. Let them retire. Let them go back to being a kid. Now you got to fill the gaps. You got to do the logistics. I think some people listening may recognize that, this has been going on long enough. I just need to apologize to my child. And don't make it a big deal. I mean, just go to him and say, you know what? I'm learning. I'm growing. I figured some things out. I used to rely on you to do X, Y, and Z around here. I just want you to know you don't have to do that anymore. That's on me. We'll take care of that. And the reason I would suggest people say this is because children are so willing to serve and do and do and do. When you retire them, they're going to miss it. They're going to miss their special role in the home and in your life. They always got extra hugs and kisses for what they did. And so expect them to be resistant to you retiring them a little bit. Like they just need to hear the words, and then you walk it out. And if they say, oh, no, wait, this is what I do. That's okay. Nope, not this time. You don't worry about that. Or you could do this, but you don't have to worry about that. Let them know it's okay with you. They're still special, even though something has shifted in their role.
Yeah, right. That's powerful.
So let's thank you for all that information. Let's flip the scenario a bit, because this is what we hear about a lot as we're coaching couples of a child that's being parentified in the other home. So I'm thinking of a scenario of a child who at mom's house is very much responsible for the siblings and getting mom going, and mom's kind of low functioning. And then she comes over to dad's house and she spends a lot of time and energy worrying about what's happening in that other home while she's gone, and wanting to check in on mom and check in and see what's happening there. What advice would you have for this dad, for other parents in this situation where they know what's going on in the other home? They don't have control over it, but what kind of conversation could they have with their child?
And they want to counterbalance it.
Yeah.
I'd start with a character affirmation of that child and say, what's so inspiring to me is to see how empathy and compassion and kindness are built into your heart. And that just makes me so proud. I love that I get to see that in my own child. And here's the thing though, that empathy and compassion, if taken too far, or if put when you're put in a position that you are trying to manage that for someone else, that could actually really hurt your heart in the long run. And there's already been, so much pain that you've had to carry at your young age, and you've modeled that so great. And man, I am so proud of you, but I want to help be a boundary setter so that when you're here, at least what we can control, that you're in a safe spot where you're not carrying that weight and that burden and that extra. And so I'm with you in that we care deeply about the success of your my former partner, or whatever the terminology is in your house that you've decided prior to this conversation. Just say, we all want good things for both people. And you have my backing in that. I don't want anything ill for your other parent. But here are the things that are in our circle of control, and here are the things that are on the outside. And I really want to put our energy that's already limited on what we can control. So I'm on the fly here, modeling what a conversation could look like. But I would really start with, rather than telling them that, you shouldn't do that, or that's too much for you, just really affirm and validate that this child has empathy and compassion that you can't buy or bottle. But there are guardrails we need to put around that so that they don't become codependent or worried or anxious, because those are the long-term impacts of carrying life without boundaries.
I love that.
Yeah. It's excellent. And sometimes a parent feels like they've got to drill down even into the weeds more than that, because it's obvious the child is having to carry a pretty heavy burden for somebody in the other home. Here's the delicate dance. Just as Lauren said, you want to make it overt. You want to talk about it. You want to enter that space. But what you don't want to do is add a burden of your own. Meaning, you know what? I don't know why your dad makes you do that. He's terrible. He's a horrible dad. He shouldn't. Well, guess what you're doing? You're putting your own burden on the child about a burden they're getting in the other home. So you're just adding. So that's where you don't want to go. But what you can do, I think, is with a great deal of compassion and mercy and grace in your heart, say something to the child that makes clear that you see their position. It might sound a little bit like, you know what? I see how hard you work to take care of things at your dad's house. Yeah, I overheard you talking in the kitchen to your dad on the phone, and I heard you telling him how to fix it and how to make it right and stuff he's got to do. And I just want you to know that I see that's something you have to carry, and it's hard. And here's the other little piece, Mike and Kim, that I think is really, of course you're taking care of your dad. You love him as it should be. Of course you are. There's nothing wrong with that. But also know that's heavy. There's a downside to that. You don't get to spend much time with your friends, because when you're at your dad's house, you're having to worry about what's going on in the home all the time. So you just sort of don't get to do what you want to do. I just want you to know I see that, and what a rotten, stuck place for you to be. I love you. You want to talk about this? Yeah. And that's the open invitation. But notice your heart has led with a compassionate attitude. If you get judgmental about what dad's doing, the child will not tell you. You're not safe either. So you're creating a space where maybe they can share with you some of the struggle that they feel. Never condemn them for the excessive work that they're doing. It's not on them. It's not their fault. Plus, that's an expression of love to a child. So yeah, of course you're doing all this stuff. I just want you to know I see how hard it is too. Do you want to talk about this? And you're trying to create that open door where maybe you have some dialogue. Even if they don't talk back to you at that point and give you anything, you've at least acknowledged the bind they feel every single day. At least somebody has seen how hard it is for them to do life in that space. And that has value, I think, just from the standpoint, they know they're not crazy. They walk away going, okay, it's not just me. Maybe that just is empowering in some way. But what you're trying to do is at least create a safe environment. Now, last comment I would add is the fix here is not through the child. The fix is to contact the parent in the other home and try to have a conversation. Most people listening are going, yeah, we already tried that 100 times. Didn't get us anywhere. That's why the child's parentified. Yes, I get it. So this may not get you anywhere, but the point here is de-triangulate your child. Don't put them back in the middle again. Yeah. You try to circumvent that and go directly to the adults in the other home and encourage them to figure out how to stand up instead of laying down all the time, to stand up and be an adult again. If you're the former spouse, you probably have no voice in that dynamic at all. Sometimes a step parent will have more of a voice in the other home than you will. Probably the best option is to find Uncle Charlie, somebody that your former spouse really respects, somebody in their world they might listen to a pastor, a friend, a neighbor, somebody who means a lot to them.
Yeah.
Get Uncle Charlie to have a conversation with that parent, and maybe something sticks.
Yeah.
Or maybe if they're willing to do some family counseling, all get together.
Yep.
With a counselor.
Yeah, whatever that next step is, they can kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just takes somebody coming alongside and saying, "Hey, I'm just wondering if you need a little help." You know, that again, it's a compassionate approach. It's not an angry, condemning sort of approach. That just shuts the door. That never opens a door.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing in the first couple steps this week, when I have that opportunity, what I heard from Lauren is affirmation of character.
Yeah.
And what I heard from Ron is validation of position.
Mm,
just
good.
being able to say that out loud and recognize that with a child and help to kind of free that eek. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know but the ick feeling, the heaviness, the burden, I think is the word, being able to do that. I'm also wondering, sometimes there's some real sometimes there's a real tension between former spouses, right? Between the homes. So what about that listener who's like, oh yes, absolutely, the other home is definitely parentifying, like what is not parentification? What do you sometimes hear where somebody's just like, boy, I want to poke at that other home and they're definitely doing that, but maybe it's actually not.
Sometimes things get a bit magnified.
Yeah. What would you say to that?
That's actually a really good question. And just asking it, I hope, invites somebody listening to think, yeah, am I quick to judge? Am I quick to determine? I got a narrative in my head about my former spouse, and it's pretty rotten based on our time together and how our marriage came apart. And so if I'm not careful, I can throw everything that happens as a co-parent into the same camp of, there you go again, doing the same old stuff.
Yeah.
That's a real temptation. It's easy to do. And it's just to put a pause in there and say, maybe it's the same and maybe it's not. Just leave the room open for the possibility that they've changed, that something is shifting in their world. Yeah. I mean, God does miracles, right? Who knows what could happen?
Yeah, things can change.
Just giving yourself that pause is the first thing to do. And then another thought is just, again, don't be quick to judge. Like everybody asks their kid, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I need you to take your brother and go pick up so-and-so and bring dinner to grandma because we just can't get. That's not parentification. We need you to fill a role on this particular occasion, a habitual pattern where a child has to do that over an extended period of time. Now we're talking about something it's out of bounds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, don't look at one quick thing and call that, label it parentification.
I'm just kind of laughing and thinking of if my own kids are not in a blended family, but they're probably coming home and saying, well, mom made me empty the dishwasher today. And so she's parentifying me because that's an adult. So I feel like here's just, sometimes we make assumptions. A lot of times we make assumptions because no one teaches relationship skills until you're in crisis recovery mode. And sometimes even those theoretical frameworks are not as applicable as just the basics. And so we started by talking about roles. And maybe you just have a quick family dinner conversation or a T-chart to say, here are the roles of the children in our family, and here are the roles of the parents. And here's how those roles change when you hit these milestones, 13, 16, 18, because I think you get caught up in theoretical when you have these conversations, you want to do something differently, but no one's ever taught us, even before we were parents. We don't have a baby with a manual of here's what a parent does. And only those that take the parenting classes or read the parenting books or use resources even have the resources to know what the words roles and responsibilities even mean practically. So maybe even take it 3 steps backwards and say, let's define roles. That could have dividends in a blended family beyond the parentification conversation of just, have we discussed our roles and in the transition and as you age and as I change from dating to engaged to married to, and we'll transition into the step parent role soon. But that's something I've learned a lot from sitting at Ron's team's feet and just hearing that if you don't have the terminology and you don't even know what the words you're saying mean, you can't really get the dividends of actually applying the skill. And so here's the role of a child, here's the role of a parent, and here's how that child role adapts as you age and get a little bit more of that extension line with your own responsibility and freedom. So maybe going back to that basic question of what is the role of a parent, whether it's a blended family or even a nuclear whole family in that but before a blend, there's still benefit that can come from defining those characteristics. And I don't think we're as intentional as we could be in doing so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's powerful to ask that, opposite question of, okay, if I'm just assuming the other person is parentifying, then I'm maybe trying to counterbalance. I'm overcompensating, trying to counterbalance in my home off of an incorrect assumption. So we have to clarify, well, what is parentification and what is it not, so that I can respond most appropriately for my child.
Yeah, asking a child to contribute to the household
is
not parentification.
That's correct. That's correct. That's skill building. That's teaching them competency, your faith in them and their ability to learn. That's contributing to the home. That is not what we're talking about. It's when I really think that the biggest burden on kids is the emotional reliance.
Yes.
When you can't do life without your child helping you do life, that's upside down.
Yep.
Yeah,
and by the way, back to this counterbalance idea, you guys posed that question and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. And here's what I would say. If you have the sense that this is happening to my child in the other home, what do I do about it? I don't want you to try to counterbalance. I don't think you can. It's not like you can have, like you just said, reactionary parenting, Mike, is not going to be helpful. Now you're parenting based on how they're parenting. Seesaw, teeter-totter, like they're up, we're down, they're down, we're up. No, be the parent you need to be. Be a balanced parent. Don't counterbalance, be balanced. Love, set limits, be your kid's biggest fan in the world, chase their heart all day long as much as you possibly can, and tell them, nope, you can't do that. Sorry, give me the car keys. Like that's parenting 101. And that is in effect, healthy climate environment for a child. What's the big picture here? They're experiencing two different parenting environments, one where they're being relied upon and one where they get to be a kid and grow up and sort of have perspective about life as a natural result of growing up in a healthy family. And they will see the difference. And that's the cool thing, is that eventually, I think more often than not, those kids are able to, as they become young adults, get a little more emotionally detached from the needs of the parent in the other home. They can think for themselves. They can see life for themselves, make decisions about their own relationships based upon what was a more healthy environment. And so the net result is it does counterbalance, if I could say it that way, but you don't try to make it your objective to figure out what they're doing over there and we do something different. No, just be a good parent.
Yeah, I love that.
And I can't help but notice in some of the examples we've been sharing, and it's subconscious that we assume that there's a villain on the other side of the house, and then there's a safe, healthy development, blend. And there's this one parent who's doing things right, and then this former person who's doing it all wrong. And I feel like I can't help but think, what if both sides could grow? And what if we could actually start to create more generous assumptions of one another just in the human space? Because our brains are already pre-programmed with that negative bias, and we always get defensive of our own perspective. But we teach a lot of different theories and skills. And one of the terms of one of the workshops I do often is called "So I'm right, comma, right, question mark." Like, so I'm right? And what we explore is that there's actually a sense of rightness in two very different approaches that is rarely edified and elevated as, hey, there's a rightness in my kids being with their father and his new role and household, whether that's single or blended or dating. And there's rightness in me being a single mom or marrying into another family. And we are not the perfect side and they are not the malicious side. And when hurt is involved, we always assume that it's the other person's issue. It's the other person's fault. And so I just had this kind of gut intuition to ask the question, rather than pointing at what the child is experiencing in the other home, what are ways that you can make generous assumptions for that person, and then also try and improve your own approach, and we can all be better for it, just taking a little bit more ownership. Because I think it's hard with the villain thing. It's really hard.
It is. If I could just put that in simple terms, here's a crazy idea. You're trying to teach your children to do the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, what if you did that toward toward your former spouse, their other parent? Like, just having that generosity does change things. It does. Yeah. Well, I'm doing it over here and they'll never know about it. No, they will know about it. It flows between the households, sometimes through a child, sometimes just in your tone of your voice when you're having co-parent conversations about the child. Whatever it is, it flows over time to the other household and has the incredible power, I think, of helping to change hearts and minds over time. No guarantee that that'll happen. But I do have a pretty good guarantee that things will not get better. And that's when you stay in a posture of harsh judgment.
Absolutely.
I think of, I'm so glad you brought that up, Lauren, because, I think when we slip into this mindset that other parent is the villain, it sort of by default makes us believe that absolutely the child is the victim, and probably makes me slip into this thought that I'm the hero.
I have to save them.
And now we've got this triangulation going. And guess what? I got to save them, and that points to what Ron's saying is, Mike, you asked the wrong question in the first place. It's not about counterbalancing. Let's get the question right. It's just simply about, what do I do? Well, I'd be an effective, loving, present, responsible parent in my home. And that in itself will make a difference for your child. Just a personal story. I moved back and forth between my dad and stepmom's home and my grandparents on my deceased mom's side. And I got to spend, maybe one weekend a month with my grandparents. And there was some time where there was tension between those homes, and I didn't get to spend any time over there. And just that tiny amount of time of Nana and Papa being who they were, being present, loving, always able to count on them, everything that they embodied really made a difference in my adult life as I was recovering from some of the abuse that was going on in my step family of origin.
Yeah.
And they hardly had any time at all. It wasn't about quantity of time. It was radically about the quality of time that they provided for me, just being who they were. They weren't trying to fix anything that was happening.
Yeah, they didn't
badmouth. Just being who they were.
Yeah. I was thinking of a story as Lauren was talking about generosity. It made me think of a story I've told many, many times. It's a true story about a woman who came up to me at a step family conference I was doing, and at a break, and she said, "Okay, got a question. I'm the stepmom. My 5-year-old stepson came to me the other day and said, 'Hey,' and by the way, I got to preface this story with, one of the great things about young children is that they're just so honest. They're so innocent. They don't know you're not supposed to say certain things out loud like adults know. Right. We adults understand you're supposed to hide things and veil it, So this little kid doesn't know that yet. So he comes up to his stepmom and says, "Hey, when I'm here with you at Dad's house, can I love you? And then when I go to my mom's house, can I hate you?" Now, this is a child revealing parentification. What he's saying is, my mom needs me to hate you. Anybody who's listening right now thinks, this doesn't happen with young kids. Oh, no. Children can feel shame in their brain. Neuroscience says 18 months to 2 years of age, they can feel shame long before they ever feel guilt. That comes around age 3. Kids read the cues of the people they care about the most, and they internalize it in a nanosecond. Don't tell me they don't get it. They know how to take care of you. Can I love you when I'm here? This is this child's request, and hate you when I go to mom's house. I need to have a different posture about you when I'm at my mom's house, because she needs me to not like you.
Yeah.
What a burden.
What a burden. And he's literally asking for release from that burden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, at least from you, is it okay that I hate you or pretend I hate you over there because I don't want to feel
that's the innocence of a young child. A teenager would just hold it against you.
Yep.
They would just follow through with the directive from their mother.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bring it up. So this precious 5-year-old says it out loud. And so I looked at this stepmom and I said, so what did you say? And she looked at me, she said, well, what I wanted to say was, and I was like, oh, I can guess what you wanted to say. You wanted to set this right. You wanted to tell this kid, no, you don't hate me when you go to your mom's house. Like, what would that do? That would just add more burden to the child. A 5-year-old carrying back and forth the agendas of adults in their households. This is a burden. So then she says, but what I said to him was, yes, you can. Now, I just want to acknowledge for your listeners, there is a cost to helping kids wrestle with these burdens. And sometimes you have to pay the cost because this stepmom's going to get the short end of the stick. And as this child grows, if nothing changes, this 5, 6, 7, 10-year-old is going to be mean to her. He's not going to be warm and fuzzy with her because there's a part of him that can't. Because mom needs me to not feel that way about you. He's going to be conflicted, hot, cold, probably for some time. And the stepmom's going to pay the price. And it's not right. It's not fair. And it's the reality of the situation. What needs to change is on the adult level. Like she, or probably better, much better, her husband needs to talk to his former wife and hopefully try to eliminate the burden on the child at the adult level. But what she needed to give him was the gift of generosity. Yes, you don't owe me anything.
Yeah.
You be a kid.
Yeah.
I love that you bring that up, Ron, because so many times we hear, a hurting step parent who's being thrown under the bus over and over say things like, well, they need to know the truth. They need to know what their parent really did and how they contributed, and they need to know. And we just say, no, they don't. Yeah. They don't need to hear that from you.
Sometimes, somewhere, some kids need to know more of the story. And when the context is they're asking, you're not using it as a weapon against the other home.
Right.
It's not a heavy, blunt, instrument that you're using. When the context is a calm conversation, and the child is persistent, I want to know where babies come from. Please tell me where babies come from. Right. That's a conversation to have, but not a conversation with an agenda attached to it. That is not the conversation to have.
Yeah,
right. And appropriately at the right time and the right age and stage.
Yes.
It seems we have to be very thoughtful about the conversation being for the benefit of the child. Not for the benefit of me.
Right.
Hey, I want to make sure we get to another piece of this whole thing. We've been talking a lot about bio parents in this, and 2 different homes and the challenge. I mean, this the kind of stuff happens when both bio parents are still in their single parent years and all of those things are going on. But then eventually someone else comes along. We're forming a step family. And Lauren, in your first book titled In Their Shoes, you talked about something in there called step parentification. I wonder if you could describe what you mean by step parentification. And let's talk a little bit about the impact of that. What a great conversation. Ron and Lauren bring such depth and insight to these challenging dynamics, and we're so grateful for both of them.
Yeah.
This was only part of our conversation with Ron and Lauren, and next week we're going to pick up right where we left off.
Yeah, you won't want to miss that. Personally, I am so invested and interested in getting into the nitty-gritty depths of understanding what our kids experience. But you know what? We're 22 years into our blend. Honestly, there was a time not so long ago when it was really hard for me to hear these kinds of discussions and even process through all of this because it was painful and hard for me to hear and to face.
Yeah.
Thinking about what my daughter might be going through would often bring up feelings of deep guilt and regret for me. But over time, I started to realize that it's unproductive to stay stuck in guilt and to continuously beat myself up over what Annika might be experiencing due to my divorce and remarriage.
Yeah.
And the truth is that in the big picture, Guilt from the past wasn't helping me be the parent I really needed to be in the present. And it certainly wasn't helping my daughter to process and move through her tough emotions. Guilt and regret are things that most parents tend to drag into their single parent years, and it follows them into blended family life. It's natural to feel responsible when we see our kids hurting. But I want to encourage you to examine your own painful emotions and decide if they're actually helping you to better support your kids and move forward, or are they dragging you down and keeping you stuck? Honestly consider if your guilt and regret is helpful or hurtful. You know, I've been there. I know the impact of guilt and regret. And most of the time, it's quite negative, and it can even be debilitating for a parent.
So if today's conversation with Ron and Lauren has opened your eyes to dynamics that might have caused some discomfort for you, and, you know, thinking about this possibility of unhealthy roles or inappropriate boundaries in your home has you feeling a bit down, or you're struggling emotionally, we just encourage you to stop right now and take some time to do what Kim was just talking about. Examine your own emotions, especially any residual guilt or regret that you might be feeling, and decide what you're going to do with that. You don't have to allow these strong emotions to drag you down and keep you from learning and growing as a parent.
Yes. You know, our goal with this podcast is to open up new awareness so that you can approach your challenges with understanding, confidence, and strength. But if you're feeling weighed down with guilt and regret, chances are you simply won't have the capacity to do that. I know I didn't, which is why I had to take an honest look at where these emotions were coming from and how I was going to move beyond painful guilt and regret so that I could be the parent I needed to be for my daughter.
So if any of this is resonating with you and you're ready to find some fresh understanding, some confidence, and some strength and kind of kick that unproductive guilt to the curb, but you need a little help to get there, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 99. That episode's called 3 Tips to Help You Move Beyond Painful Guilt and Regret. And we'll put a link in the show notes for you to do that right now.
That's right. And if you need some help and support, please reach out to us for a free initial coaching call. We'll add a link for you to do that in the show notes as well. Okay, having said all that, we also encourage you to join us next week for the second half of our conversation with Ron and Lauren, where we'll discuss a unique facet of all of this called step parentification.
Absolutely. And this is something we, again, want to open up your awareness around so that you can approach these challenging dynamics from a place of understanding, confidence, and strength.
Absolutely. By learning more about what your kids and stepkids might be experiencing, you can strategically show up well and ease the tensions that often come with blending. So you don't want to miss it.
That's right. We're going to pick up the conversation right where we left off with Ron and Lauren next week. But for now, this makes part 1 of this episode a wrap.
Until next time.